Hey guys. So, I want to cover so many topics, and I wasn't sure how to break them down or how many videos it should be. So I'm gonna throw them all into this video and hope people find what they're looking for. Because in part, I want to address two particular webcomics, although I'll throw a third in there. But I want to address them because of a writing technique that they use that's really fascinating and really useful. And then I have questions. But as you may know from watching my videos, I like JRPGs. I like the stories of them more than anything. And a common factor in JRPG stories is that something starts small and turns into so much more. Which sounds simple. But it's actually a really effective way to start a story. A small thing that then leads you into a much bigger, more complex world. Right? But the trick then is to tie that small thing back into the end. To make it so that it all stays connected, and that the small thing at the beginning wasn't just an excuse for the adventure. There's actually a regular comic that does this called Bone. If you haven't seen it, it's really good. It starts out very cartoony, and it seems like it's just a simple, gag strip. And the characters are drawn rather plainly. And then Bone very quickly takes those plain-drawn comedic characters and throws them into a very complex fantasy story that a lot of people compare to Lord of the Rings. Just in terms of scope. So that's really well done. You should check out Bone. But the two comics I really wanted to talk about today are Roomies by David Willis and Kid Radd by Dan Miller. Roomies, and I'll put links to these in the description, Roomies really does start out as a simple college gag comic strip. It's a webcomic. And I'll tell you, the beginning is rough. Just the way it's drawn, it is not pretty at all. And it takes a while to look decent. It's also one of the oldest webcomics, I believe. But at some point very early on in this comedic strip of college humor, there's an alien abduction, which is just played for laughs. And then the people are dropped back and the aliens bugger off. Over time, though, Roomies evolves. The creator changes the name of the strip to try and mark where the evolutions happen. It turns from Roomies into It's Walkie into Walkie and Joyce. But for me, it really is one continuous story, right? It's a continuous story where the main character shows up like halfway through, which, Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency did that. Because that alien abduction turns out to be a precursor to an alien invasion, and a lot of the characters that we met in the college strip, turns out that they were abducted as children, and they're recruited into this secret government agency to fight the alien. It becomes this grand, overarching story with all these little tendrils that reach back. It starts out simple and becomes infinitely more complex. And I think it's fascinating for that, even though the art is a little hard to handle these days. And it does stay as a simple gag strip for a long time. I love it when a story starts out simple and becomes complex. Now, David Willis then, after that whole story arc finished, with all of the aliens and the invasions and all that, he started a new comic called Short Packed, which was set in the same universe, but it never grew into something epic. It was mainly jokes about some of these characters working at a toy store. And there was some crossover and occasional references back. He has since ended Short Pack, and he has started a comic called Dumbing of Age, which is a reboot of the Roomies universe. It's got all of the characters from all of the other comics, except no continuity to them. And it also looks like it's never going to reach into this epic storytelling mode. It's a perfectly good comic. I read it. It's fun. But it is more college slice of life comedy as opposed to being, epic good against evil, blah, blah, blah. So, Roomies, I recommend. But the one, well, we'll get to the one I really wanted to talk about. Another comic that does this is Captain SNES, which is a sprite comic. The basic premise is, Captain N, the game master, the cartoon, except it's Captain S. It's a college kid who gets sucked into a Super Nintendo emulator. And it's a continuation of the Captain N. And it starts out just goofy, silly, and vulgar. But the author starts laying down some really deep story threads. You can sense the size of this story is immense. The only problem with Captain SNES is it doesn't update very regularly. It's pretty hit and miss. And for a while, it stopped updating for like 8 months, and I thought it was just gone. But the comic I really wanted to talk about today that addresses this is a comic called Kid Radd. And if you haven't seen Kid Radd, KIDRADD, you need to go check it out. Kid Radd is a pseudo-sprite comic in that it is sprite-based, but it's all unique custom sprites, right? It's not pulled from any existing game. So while it is considered a sprite comic, it's not as simple as most other sprite comics are. Also, it's animated. Each episode is a series of GIFs that are often animated that tell the story, and you click through multiple images to get the whole day's episode. Kid Radd starts out as our hero. Kid Radd is in his game Kid Radd, which is a 1989 action platformer. And it mainly is making fun of some of the tropes of that. The boss has multiple forms, the NPC girlfriend who just stands in the corner, enemies that touch you hurt you, but everything that hits you only takes 1 hit point, no matter how massive it is. These sorts of jokes, right? And it's fairly, it's cute, it's fine. When it gets interesting is, and it's not that late in, Kid Radd's universe gets invaded by video game characters from another universe. Because it turns out Kid Radd is living in a ROM on the internet. And there's a group of characters that invade ROMs to try and liberate the characters. So Kid Radd and his friends get liberated and find themselves in a world populated by video game characters from all different types of video games. Each with their own unique rules. Like his NPC girlfriend cannot attack, but she also cannot take damage because she's an NPC. His friend is one of the minor enemies from his game. Anything he touches takes damage. So it's all of these fun little... And I'm a sucker for stories that cross genres or combine. Even though they're making up their own universe, it's still this crossover. It's a little Wreck-It Ralph, but long before anybody thought of Wreck-It Ralph. Right? And it evolves into this grand story, saving the internet and saving all of the gaming, and Kid Radd having to reach out to his gamer. It's so good. It's really well made. While you won't find any video games you actually know in there, you will find parodies of them. And parody isn't quite the right word. Homages, perhaps. Pastiches? For example, Earthbound is pretty heavily referenced in one section. But it's not Earthbound. It's just a game that's laid out similar to Earthbound, with similar settings and similar characters, right? All sorts of games have that, where it's almost, right? It's almost this game, it's almost that game. I love Kid Radd. Every now and again, I'm reminded that it existed, and I go back and I read the whole thing again. It's no longer online, but there is a mirror website, and I'll put that in the links, and you can go read Kid Radd. It's rad. The thing I find really confusing, though, and the thing that really made me want to do a vlog to talk about this issue, is that the creator of excuse me one moment. I apologize. The creator of Kid Radd was a man named Dan Miller, who apparently never made anything else. And you can't really find him, because Dan Miller's a fairly common name, and the original Kid Radd website is down, and you can't find Dan Miller. And I find that... what causes that? Like, we talked about David Willis. David Willis made this big complex story and then kept going. He made other stories or iterations on the same story, but he kept working. What makes somebody create one really amazing thing and then just vanish? Disappear, right? He's just gone. He hasn't made anything else that we know of. He's moved on with his life, but I don't understand... because I like to create things. Obviously, I do all these videos, I do reviews, I write, I have books, and I want to keep making things. I don't know how he had this story inside of him, and once he got it out, he was just done? I don't get that. I find it very strange. Dan Miller, if you're out there, please tell us what you've been working on. Because Kid Radd was great. It was, and as it's turned out, it was ahead of its time. Because now we've got things like Wreck-It Ralph, which are working on the same theme. So, it was really good. Definitely check out Kid Radd. Maybe take a look at Roomies. Take a look at Captain SNES. And definitely check out Bone. You can get it in one giant collection. It's a huge book. But it's definitely worth the read. So, there we go. I just wanted to talk about, you know, small things blooming into bigger things being a great storytelling device, and these few examples that I really like. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.